Hey guys, so I just wanted to make a quick, probably not as quick as I think, but a quick video about just something I've seen going around the internet of people kind of getting all tweaked that Joe Biden's being portrayed as like some sort of deity on the cover of a magazine, Jacobin. And don't worry, it's not mainstream media. Jacobin's a little bit more fringe, but it's a pretty well-known magazine in left-wing circles of all things. So I can kind of see why people might have their gripes and their druthers if they look at this and they think, oh my God, the left is deifying Joe Biden. But when you realize what kind of magazine it is and what article it's attached to, you might think a little bit different. So let's start. Obviously, this is the cover. Joe Biden's up here. Then you got your Bill Clinton, your Barack Obama, your Hillary Clinton, Pelosi and Schumer, Anthony Fauci, MSM, ostensibly, and the people down there. Now, that's all well and good. Now, it's ridiculous looking. He's shirtless. But basically what the title associated with it is and what the sentiment associated with it is Biden our time. And the article that it's linked with is entitled, Get Ready to Fight Joe Biden. So it just starts off, the departure of Donald Trump from the White House is cause for celebration. Our task now is to build a democratic socialist alternative to Joe Biden and to oppose the democratic establishment's neoliberal agenda. So I probably don't have to tell you, but Jacobin magazine is a really far left magazine. Like, a lot of people would call it socialist. Like, a lot of people think Joe Biden is socialist. He's not. Don't even worry about that. Joe Biden is actually, he's anti-Medicare for all, so we're not going to have Medicare under him. He probably will never do that. He was never defund the police, despite the fact that they like to parrot that a lot. He never said that. And defund the police is actually kind of it's just a weird way of putting it. Like, it sounds worse than it is. Like, if I heard somebody say defund the police, I'd be like, oh no, you can't do that. But really what defund the police is, I guess the best way to describe it is, I saw this footage this summer of this police officer lamenting the fact that, like, oh my God, we get called out on thousands of calls, like half of them, they don't even need us, more of a social worker could have done it, and we're overstretched. Essentially, the police department is overstretched by all these calls of, like, just drunken disorderliness where nobody's really getting violent or loud parties or whatnot, and they're just like, you could just send like a social worker to do all that stuff. So what they want to do is sort of restructure the funding of the police department and have other organizations work alongside it in tandem with it to handle calls that the police don't necessarily need to handle. So anyway, that's really what defunding the police is. But I can totally see people's hesitancy about that. So Jacobin magazine, just to give you a little information. So this is Jacobin. I always go to my trusty media bias fact check whenever I look at any media nowadays. I've said this before and I'll say it again. The reason that I trust media bias fact check, in other words, people have accused me of like, well, maybe you're a fact checker. Maybe you need to fact check your fact checker. The reason that I go to media bias fact check is that basically everything that we think about CNN, MSNBC, and Fox, it basically says is correct. It's like, I think it gives Fox and MSNBC a mixed grade in their reporting and says that they're more or less far right or far left. MSNBC, I think it gave a slightly better grade of mostly factual. I can't remember. It was one of the two. It was either CNN or MSNBC. And then the other more liberal skewed channel was like mixed. But anyway, but of course when they say liberal, they mean establishment liberal. They don't mean like fringe liberal. Anyway, I'm going off on a tangent. So Jacobin has been around for a while. It's obviously a left bias, but the reporting grade it gets is high. And it just says these media sources are moderately to strongly biased towards liberal causes through story selection and or political affiliation. They may utilize strong loaded words wording that attempts to influence the audience by using appeal to emotion and stereotypes. Now, this media bias fact check is it's like an independent project. It doesn't have a search bar on it, which is weird. So whenever I want to verify something, I'll just type in media bias fact check and then the name of the publication next to it. But real briefly, it says, founded in 2011, Jacobin is a democratic socialist quarterly. So these people are social democrats. A lot of them would call them socialist, but they're pretty far to the left. Socialist quarterly magazine based in New York, offering American leftist perspectives on politics, economics, culture. Bhaskar Sankara is a founder and editor. You can find a complete staff on the About page. So anyway, that is a brief little description. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the article that magazine cover is associated with. Get Ready to Fight Joe Biden is the title of it. And I'm just going to read little snippets of it. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I'm just going to read the parts that I found most poignant. It says, the problem is that our most important goals can't be accomplished through the pressure group strategy. For example, Biden said on the campaign trail that he would veto Medicare for all. And that's very important to the socialist cause, Medicare for all. A lot of people think that's bad and dangerous, like, oh, the cat thinks so too. Like, oh, we're gonna have governmental health care and it's all gonna be bad and we'll be beholden to the government in ways we don't want to. But another way to look at it too, and the way that they look at it, is that it also puts healthcare under the same umbrella, such that we all get essentially the same quality, such that the government would want to keep up the quality of the healthcare. Now, obviously, I know they have their own secret doctors and so on and so forth, and they will still have privilege, but at the same time, it'll put everything more in a level playing field. So that's the philosophy here. So he said he would veto Medicare for all. There's no plausible scenario where he would willingly support nationalizing the same health insurance industry he befriended decades ago. Even if he followed through with his campaign promise of a public option, it's extraordinarily difficult to imagine Biden and his centrist allies holding strong in the face of massive industry resistance. And that's another thing. Joe Biden really is centrist. That's why Jacobin is going after him, because he's really the equivalent of a moderate Reagan Republican. It's sort of like party inflation this day and age. Each side is getting more and more pronounced. So in other words, Republicans are going more to the right and Democrats are now going more to the left. So a lot of politicians fall more in the centrist window now than anything else, believe it or not, which is really interesting. Okay, so the only way to win social democracy in the United States, never mind anything more ambitious, is to elect hundreds of AOCs and Rashida Tlaibs to Congress and build a massive working class movement. So yeah, they're definitely not for Joe Biden, because those politicians are quite different. We'll never get there by acting like loyal foot soldiers of the Biden administration, focusing our fire only on Republican obstructionists and treating social democratic policies as friendly suggestions for Democratic leadership. What Biden won't say at the inauguration. The only way to do this is to draw clear, bright lines between what workers desperately need and what the Biden administration is willing to give them. We can't deny the obvious reality of Republican obstruction, but instead of fixating on it, we should emphasize what the new administration could do if it wanted to. If Biden embraced Medicare for all tomorrow, it's unlikely it would pass the House, where it's opposed by all Republicans and about half of Democrats, and certain that it wouldn't get through the Senate. But if Biden used his inaugural address today to advocate it as an urgent necessity during the pandemic, the kinds of arguments Democrats and Republicans would be having for the next 2 years ahead of the midterms would be very different. He won't do that, though, because he doesn't want to do it. Similarly, if Biden followed through on his campaign promise to introduce quote-unquote card check legislation to make it easier to organize unions, it wouldn't become law. But if he used his inaugural address to talk about how powerless workers are when they don't have unions, it would be a boon to organizing campaigns in blue states and cities. Harkening back to the 1930s, when CIO organizers told workers, the president wants you to join a union. It would also make life less comfortable for Republicans who pretend to want to bring back good jobs, but don't like to talk about the strong unions that made those jobs good in the first place. The reason that Biden won't engage in this all-out attack on the power of bosses isn't that Republicans are somehow stopping him. It's that he doesn't want to do it. Nor would this alternative version of Biden have to limit himself to rhetorical gestures. He could copy and paste the entire suite of executive orders Bernie Sanders floated at the end of January, which ranged from directing the Justice Department to legalize marijuana to canceling federal contracts for firms paying less than $15 an hour. Let's see. He could order the Department of Education to stop collecting student loan debt. He could even issue the order to extend Medicare to every resident in the United States. To be sure, Republicans would issue a flurry of legal challenges to these ambitious reforms. Biden would lose at least some of these battles, but Biden being Biden, he won't even try. So they don't have a lot of faith in Biden at all. To achieve the reforms we need, we must focus our energy on not lobbying centrists to be more social democratic, but on building a left that can beat them in the near future and govern in our own name. If that goal is our lodestar, our task is clear: to draw unambiguous contrast at every turn. So anyway, I just wanted to clarify that. I'll leave the link to the article in the description should you choose to want to read it. And so I hope that cleared away some of the confusion. Don't worry, they're not deifying Joe Biden. Nobody's doing that. Least of all the far left. This cover is just a satire. Anyway, that's about all. Peace out.